Well, we're in session 62, or 52 rather. I'm getting old. And I wanted to finish showing you this page from my dissertation, my book, where I quote E.P. Sanders, and I'll just, I guess, read some of it, or summarize it anyway, that there's this assumption he thinks that the temple was supposed to be pure of the sort of practice of selling animals and changing of money, and that Jesus wanted to restore the real purpose of the temple. This seems to owe more to the 19th century view that what is external is bad than to a first century Jewish view. Those who write about Jesus' desire to return the temple to its original true purpose, the pure worship of God, seem to forget that the principal function of any temple is to serve as a place for sacrifice, and that sacrifices require the supply of suitable animals. This had always been true of the temple in Jerusalem. In the time of Jesus, the temple had long been the only place in Israel at which sacrifices could be offered. This is centralization legislation that takes place in Deuteronomy and elsewhere. And this means that suitable animals and birds must have been in supply at the temple site. There was not an original time when worship at the temple had been pure from the business which the requirement of unblemished sacrifices creates. Further, no one remembered a time when pilgrims carrying various coinages had not come. In the view of Jesus and his contemporaries, the requirement to sacrifice must always have involved the supply of sacrificial animals, their inspection, and the changing of money. Thus, one may wonder what scholars have in mind who talk about Jesus' desire to stop this particular use of the temple. Just what would be left of the service if the supposedly corrupting externalism of sacrifices and the trade necessary to them were purged? Here, as often, here often we see a failure to think concretely and a preference for vague religious abstractions. There's a typo there in E.P. Sanders. So Bornkamm, for example, another giant older time than E.P. Sanders, speaks of the action as more than an act of reform to restore the temple service to its original purity, which means that it was also that, well, so that's enough of that. But what I wanted to do today is, for the benefit of those who are following these, commentaries on Mark, however few or many they are or will be, I wanted to sort of take the opportunity to uh, present the thesis that I argued and wrote about, which is behind everything that I am commenting on. And so this is a trip down memory lane, January 13th, year 2000 in Rome. I wish I could go back 20 years, believe me. And the original title that I gave my dissertation was Exorcism, Exousia, the Widow, and the Temple. The meaning of Jesus' action and teaching in the temple, Mark 11:15 through 17. And so you have that. And the thesis, which I think I read yesterday, is basically that Jesus' action and teaching in the temple, as narrated in Mark, is a symbolic cessation of the Jewish sacrificial system and a prelude to the destruction of the temple that he predicts in 13:2. Mark subtly but carefully prepares the knowing reader for this understanding of the action from the first verses of his gospel, and symbolically depicts the destruction of the temple rendered obsolete by Jesus' sacrificial death by the rending of the temple curtain in 1538, simultaneously with Jesus' death. So the argument, I'm just going to read it, maybe make a comment. If I don't run out of time, I might have to continue this. One, that Mark's first verses subtly announce the eschatological purifying visit of the Lord to his temple. This is out of Malachi 3, where the Lord is going to purify the Levites so that their mincha or cereal offering can be acceptable, etc. It's also the Lord will suddenly come to his temple. And so you really have, and it's a new Exodus passage. You know, they repeat the angel, messenger coming before me, which is where Malachi, the name, comes from. And so you've got a whole new Exodus thing there with Isaiah, and you've got an Exodus going to the place in Exodus 23, I think verse 22. We've seen this in the first sessions. Jesus' first act in his public ministry is a teaching and an exorcism. The teaching is said to be based on exousia and is contrasted with that of the scribes. The unclean spirit announces that Jesus has come to destroy evil spirits. Finally, the exorcism itself is described as a new teaching according to exousia. Jesus' ministry is thus a victory over evil, accomplished through a new eschatological teaching indistinguishable from exorcism. The basis for it is his exousia, see number 4 below. 3, Jesus cures a leper, something only God could do, and certainly not the Jewish priest, who could only confirm that such a cure had already taken place, Leviticus 14. The purpose of the ritual prescribed was the leper's readmission into the cultic community. Jesus tells the ex-leper to do what Moses prescribed as a sign against them, but the leper does not do this. He starts to preach Jesus so that they start coming to Jesus from everywhere. 4, in chapter 2, which we talked about recently, Jesus does 2 related things. He forgives the sins of the paralytic based on faith and demonstrates his exousia as Son of Man to do this upon the earth by restoring the paralytic. Exousia, dominion, the Aramaic shaltan, is taken from Septuagint Daniel 7, where it appears thrice. It is the plenipotentiary authority of the one like a son of man. Upon the earth alludes to Septuagint Daniel 4:17. The Lord of heaven has exousia over everything that is in heaven and upon the earth. 5, in chapter 5, Jesus heals a woman with a blood flow. It is her faith which heals her, also described as salvation. Leviticus 15, it's actually the next chapter in Leviticus, has the prescriptions for expiation, the Hebrew verb kapar or kippur, after such a woman is found to be healed. As in the case of a poor leper, the poor Israelite offers doves for his or her expiation. Since Jesus has saved the woman, that's the language in chapter 5, any reference to what the temple may have to offer seems superfluous. Near the center of Mark's gospel is Jesus' great diatribe against the Pharisees and some scribes who had come from Jerusalem. He accuses them of abandoning God's law in favor of their tradition. This results in death. Depriving one's parents of what they need to live by claiming temple offer or korban is the curse, quote unquote, prohibited in Exodus 21, part of the homicide legislation. You kill your parents if you deprive them of the necessary means to sustain themselves, because you're putting your stuff in trust for God. Jesus goes on to completely redefine the purity laws, making or declaring all foods clean. This has far-reaching consequences for the whole temple sacrificial system based on and aiming at ritual purity. 7, Jesus predicts the passion and death of the Son of Man. I think 7 uses of the Son of Man in the Passion predictions. In 1045, the Son of Man is identified with the Isianic servant who came to give his life as a ransom, lutron, for many, Isaiah 53. Lutron is the Septuagint word for Hebrew expiation, atonement, kippur, and redemption, geula. Mark is saying that it is Jesus who truly effects these. Another feature of the Jewish law, which is thus obviated, is the temple tax prescribed by Exodus 30, called an atonement price, ha kippurim, in 30, verse 16. It had to be paid near Passover time and only in sanctuary shekels. This was the principal reason for the money changers in the temple to change the coins brought by the pilgrims into the accepted currency, Tyrian shekels. With the foregoing elements, we can now approach the temple act and teaching. Jesus enters Jerusalem and the temple, but Mark, alone among the evangelists, sandwiches the cleansing, so called, with the cursing of the fig tree. Jesus curses a leafy but fruitless fig tree. It is not the kairos for figs, for the kairos time is fulfilled and the kingdom has arrived. Never again shall anyone avail himself of the fruits of this tree. This means that the time of the temple is over, as will become clearer. The act itself is symbolic. Jesus throws, using the exorcism verb ekbalo, everyone, sellers and buyers, out of the temple, and catastrophizes, using the Septuagint verb applied to Sodom and Gomorrah, the now obsolete tables of the money changers and dove sellers. Mark alone knows that he permitted Noah to transport sacred vessels through the temple. The temple system is suspended. And then Jesus teaches, he announces the Isianic eschatological name for God's house, a house of prayer for all nations, and denounces what it has become, a cave of violent persons, borrowing a phrase from Jeremiah's speech against the temple, Jeremiah 7, where the temple's destruction is prophesied. Who the violent persons are, not thieves, will be illustrated by the parable to follow. And there's other language there that I'm not going to get into right now. 10, Jesus' exousia is challenged. Jesus harkens back to John the Baptist, who began the eschatological period as Elijah, preaching forgiveness of sins apart from the temple, and announces Jesus. This also kind of harkens back to Malachi 3. Behold, I send you Elijah at the very end. The leaders pondering among themselves links up with the scribes pondering in 2:6 against Jesus' ability to forgive sins, and also with his exousia as Son of Man. 11, Jesus then replies to the leaders of the parable, to the leaders with the parable of violent vine dressers who kill the servants, prophets, diligently sent by the Lord of the vineyard, Isaiah 5, terms also evocative of Jeremiah 7. In the eschaton, the beloved Son is sent. Look at Mark 1:11 with passion overtones, the baptism, and 9:7, the transfiguration, a prophetic commissioning, and he is killed. Therefore, these leaders will have God's vineyard taken away from them. Others, quote unquote, will be given the vineyard. The vine dressers' actions make them the sort of bloodshedders that Baritzim indicates in Jeremiah 7:11. See also Ezekiel 18:10. Then Jesus speaks of a new construction of which he is the cap or cornerstone. And we know who the others are. 12. Jesus teaches in the temple, but his last words there condemn the scribes who devour widows' houses under the pretext of piety, and he praises a poor widow who puts her whole vios, life, means of subsistence, into the temple treasury. Jesus then leaves the temple and predicts that not one stone will remain upon another. He is sitting on the eschatological Mount of Olives, see Zechariah 14, opposite and perhaps looking down on the temple as he delivers his eschatological discourse. A desecration of the temple plays a role in the events of the end. 13, in Jesus' trial before the whole Sanhedrin. false witnesses reminiscent of the false prophets in Jeremiah's own temple speech trial in Septuagint Jeremiah 33, Masoretic text Jeremiah 26, state that they heard Jesus say he would destroy the man-made, a 70 term for idols, temple and build another not man-made in 3 days. This other temple may be the others to whom the vineyard is to be given, and who seem to be related to the construction of which the builders rejected the chief stone. And the Isaianic citation, Isaiah 56:7 in Mark 11:17, is followed by an oracle in 56:8 that Yahweh will yet gather others to the dispersed of Israel, which he has already gathered. I note that the term others does not appear in the Hebrew or the 70 or Septuagint, but it needs to be provided in any translation in order to make sense of the text. In any case, the inclusion of Gentiles is clearly intimated, especially since Isaiah 56 has already admitted eunuchs barred forever in Deuteronomy 23, and foreigners also barred by the same chapter to Yahweh's assembly and sacrifice altar and all that. 14 and last, as Jesus dies, Mark sees fit to repeat the accusation. This is very interesting because the accusations and the mocking of Jesus is not just for accusing or mocking, it's for Mark to make a point as to what is really going on. In 1529, Mark uses the present participles, which may indicate that Jesus is destroying the old temple and building the new one then and there as he gives up his life. Then, when he dies, the temple curtain is completely rent, symbolizing the disappearance of the edifice made obsolete by Jesus' expiatory and redemptive death. So that's my thesis argument. I speak about what Mark is presenting without intending any kind of supersessionism where the Jews have no more reason to exist or anything of the sort. I totally in love with Judaism and Jews. And I think, again, the Pharisees and the rabbis were kind of happy to have the Sadducees in the temple out of the way until the new temple comes, perhaps built by the Messiah, as Zechariah 3 and such talk about, and other passages. Even the temple in Ezekiel seems to come down from heaven, etc., the new temple. And so, in my view, Christians and Jews are in a dialectical relationship where the Christians announce the Messiah has come, and the Jews reply, where are the signs that the Messiah has come? So it's a challenge. Paul spoke about making Israel jealous, which I always say we're a long way from doing. And so I think that the claim, light to the nations, is something that the Jews can validly apply to themselves. Christians apply it to Jesus. So I think that we can coexist in great mutual understanding, respect, and even love. So that I have, expounded what I understand Mark is saying. I don't think I would change much. I would add stuff about the toll tax because of reading Exodus passages about those who cross over, etc., which I think one of the meanings of Hebrew, Havarim, who you cross into the covenant, you cross into the land. I don't want to get to 20 minutes, so I'm going to stop, and then next time I'll show you that chart. But with this, I hope it helps to put together the now 52 episodes that we've done. Have a good weekend.